All right, everyone. Happy hockey season. The Baker Fairburn Hockey Show is live. Presently, the Baker Hockey Show, still waiting on Matthew. He's having some, we'll call it technical difficulties, but he'll be joining us momentarily. September 18th, 2024, the first day of Sabres camp. A lot going on here since the last time Matthew and I were together with y'all. But looks like everyone has come to camp ready to go. Lindy Ruff, good to see him on the ice. We'll get into all this good stuff. Peyton Krebs' contract, where he fits, Rasmus Dahlin, the likely captain of this team, leaving practice early today. We'll get into all that stuff here once Matthew joins us. As people are trickling in, if you could please like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know when Matthew and I go live. You can find the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and leave a 5-star review if you could, please. If I sound like crap and if I look like crap, it's because I feel like crap. I think I picked something up down at the Harbor Center over the weekend, a little super spreader down there. I mean, the Prospects Challenge. Hopefully the Sabres going 1-2 at the Prospects Challenge isn't a sign of things to come, but needless to say, feeling a little off. I got up at 2:45 this morning, haven't been back to bed yet, but we're going to do it, and didn't want to wait. I know Matthew is just a few minutes away, but I know that the chat is hot and heavy and wanted to get this thing started. Didn't want to make you guys wait any longer. So I appreciate you guys hanging in there while we were late to get started tonight. So, and I see a couple comments already asking if I gave up tequila or if I was out of tequila and that's why we were late. No, but I am not drinking tonight. I'm actually going straight water. Very boring tonight for those wondering what the podcast juice is tonight for Mr. Baker here. Let me send a tweet out real quick so we can get more folks to join us. And we will be moving along here. So yes, we'll wait for Matthew to talk about a little bit of the details for what he saw, but we started to get some semblance of lines today. So looks like they're using 3 groups in training camp. 24 players were out in the first group, and kind of some, I don't know, nothing really crazy to me. So I'll just go through what we learned from the first session and what the forward lines look like. We'll start up top there first. So I don't think any surprise there with Peterka, with Thompson and Tuck as the, we'll call it line 1, with Thompson being the top centerman on this club. A line that I was hoping that they would stay with. That's how they ended the season. And it looks like they're going back with Benson, Cousins, and Quinn. But we'll put a little asterisk there because that's where also Yuri Kulik was mixing in today in practice. I saw a couple conflicting reports that he was also mixing in with the Thompson line, but it looks like after talking to Matthew earlier that it was pretty much a rotation with Benson going out and Kulik playing that left side with Cousins and Quinn. I like the looks of that line. I know that there was speculation that maybe Zucker would be up on that line with Cousins and Quinn, but I think it does make sense to try Benson or Kulik there. I really liked Benson, Cousins, Quinn at the end of last season. So encouraging to see that Lindy agrees with that combination. And then we'll just continue on with McLeod between Zucker and Greenway. We were seeing Peyton Krebs rotate in a little bit on that line. We were also seeing Peyton Krebs rotate in at center on a bottom line of Lafferty, Malenstein, and Obey-Kubel. I think that Lafferty, Malenstein, Obey-Kubel is a line that many of us thought that we would see. The 3 acquisitions here in the offseason playing a similar style. I like the look of that line. Hopefully that sticks. And then they're just going to have to figure out where Krebs fits in this attack. It's going to be kind of interesting. So Peyton Krebs gets his deal late in the offseason here. 2-year deal, $1.45 million per season. And it's a big season, obviously, for Peyton Krebs. But, you know, I know that a lot of folks are down on him. He's going to have to fight tooth and nail to find action in this lineup. It's really hard to see where he fits. It's hard to see if he's going to be a centerman or are they going to put him back out on wing. I think injuries could dictate Peyton Krebs' level of ice time that he gets this year, but also maybe the play of others. You know, I don't think that Peyton Krebs in any universe is going to unseat McLeod, and who, you know, seemingly just with his experience that he has, his track record, what he did At the end of last season in Edmonton and some of the playoff performances that McLeod had with Edmonton, that, Krebs is going to unseat him there at 3C. So, he's looking like a 10, 11, 12, 13 forward. He's going to have to figure out, really it's up to him to come in and play really well in this kind of shortened preseason. We'll kind of get into that too with Matthew when he gets here. Kind of a goofy preseason schedule this year with the whole European component. And kind of curious to see what Matthew has to say about those line combinations when he gets here, as well as the whole Peyton Krebs factor. But yeah, Kulich, let's talk about him real quick before we get to the D. So I was down for all 3 games at the Prospects Challenge, did call the 3rd game with Andrew Mossbrooks. A lot of goals, 13 goals in that game. And I did color. And usually when you do color, you have a replay monitor. We don't have a replay monitor there. So, once the goal scored, usually get the replay right up and it's easier. That's why Razor's so good. He's got a monitor to look down at and he can, go through the play a little more accurately. Very difficult doing 13 goals without a replay monitor when you're the color analyst. But Kulich in that game was excellent. He was excellent from start to finish. I think that most of the folks in here, you're diehard fans. I'm guessing you watched all of the games that were streamed if you weren't down there in attendance. But, Kulich, last time we were together on this show with Matthew, there was a comment. I think it was Mike Lipinski. What's the commenter? I try to pay attention to the commenters and your names, try to get to know you guys. We're building a community here, but I believe it was Mr. Lipinski that said, why are the Sabres afraid to play Kulich? And it wasn't really that they were afraid. Kind of where I was on that whole question or comment was Kulich wasn't fully ready last year, and I thought that he'd be ready this year. And look, a Prospects Challenge performance it's not totally indicative of readiness for the NHL. Time will tell how he looks when the pucks start flying here in preseason, but he was very good off the puck, and he made some really nice defensive plays using his stick, getting body position. I really liked his determination. And those were elements of his game that we didn't see every night last year. He had to learn. He had to get yelled at. Seth Appert was pretty hard on him last year. I liked how, they have him out at wing now because that's that's where he's going to play in the NHL, in my opinion. But I like that they put him at center for the past year and a half in Rochester to force him to learn better defensive hockey and to have more responsibility off the puck. And it's I think just that experience of the year and a half playing center in the AHL, getting yelled at, the off season, strength training. He was saying that he feels stronger after that first game. In the press room, he was talking about that he felt stronger, and that game against Columbus was a hard game. Those first 2 games were super physical. And Kulich came away best player on the ice. I don't want to, parrot everything that Kevin Adams and Lindy both said about him today, but there's a reason that he's in that group of 24 and he's fighting for a spot. There's a comment in here that I did star while waiting for Matthew to get in here. I'll just throw it up on the screen here real quick about Kulich and kind of his potential use this year. And it's from Aurora Jeffrey. Is Kulich more likely to make the team as a second left wing with Cousins and Quinn, or as a third left wing, right wing with McLeod and Zucker? I think right now, the first day, not every question is going to get answered on the first day of camp, but I think this one is. I think that Kulich is going to be in your top 6 if he's going to play in the NHL this year. I think that they have an idea in mind of what that 3rd and 4th line are going to be, how they're going to play. They're going to play fast. They're going to play hard. And while Kulich would be a nice luxury to have on a line, playing, say, 3rd line minutes at some point one day, I don't see it happening this year. And frankly, I don't see it happening down the road either. He's a bona fide scoring line forward, just given his offensive skill set. And now that he's rounding out his game, and you can see it, proof is in the pudding there at the Prospects Challenge against his peer set in his age group. If he continues to do that against men in the NHL, then he'll be, you can rely on him more to play those bigger minutes in, say, a second line forward role. So that's kind of where I see Kulich. Don't see him on a third line. So I think that would be square peg round hole. And frankly, they really don't need him right now. They got some bodies that I think fit better into how they have designs for that third, fourth line to play. So talked a little bit about the forward lines. Let's get into the D. And look, I mean, with Dahlin going out early in practice today, I don't see anything that's a hint of how these pairs are going to shake out. Matthew's story at the Athletic today, he had kind of a sketch for what he thinks the D pairs are. So he had Byram Dahlin sketched out in his article at the Athletic, Owen Power with Yoki Haru, Samuelson with Clifton, and then Gilbert as an extra, and you could throw Bryson in there as well. Now, Samuelson, Clifton, I think is something that they're going to roll with, but there were other pairs that were taking drills today, and Samuelson, Clifton were together. Byram was with Yoki Haru in some drills, Bryson and Gilbert, and Power was kind of seemingly there, almost thinking that maybe they had designs to put him with Dahlin. I'm not making any judgment on the defense based on what happened today. So I guess that's TBD. But these 24 players in Group 1, Lindy's pretty clear. They said it in their press conference. Kevin Adams said in the press conference this morning before the Sabres took the ice, and then Lindy kind of reaffirmed it after the skate, basically saying, look, short camp. We're going to get kind of an idea, a concept of what we feel the NHL roster is right out of the gate and roll with that to start camp. So these 24 guys are likely part of that crew that's going to be going to Europe. I think they can take 3 others. So I think that the 3, and again, this is something I want to talk about with Matthew if he gets in here anytime soon. But, I'm thinking that you're looking at Reimer as one of them. I think you got to take 3 goalies to Europe. Probably Ryan Johnson, I would think, take another defenseman. That would be 9 defensemen, but what the hell? You could take another forward. Maybe you take Rosane and Rusek. I think if they take Johnson and Reimer, then it's probably one of Rusek and Rosane. And it's kind of interesting too, actually, the Rusek topic. Rusek's on a one-way this year. I thought that it would almost be a foregone conclusion. I think in a regular training camp environment, when it wasn't so compressed and they didn't have to, go and just kind of sketch out what they feel that their NHL roster is on the first day, that maybe Rusek would have been part of that first group. But I think with those games, in Prague, Rusek being a Czech, I mean, it might make sense to take him over Rosane, and especially for the role. I think it depends on what the role you'd have in mind for Rusek. I think I'd probably give him the nod, actually, to be in that group of, and again, we'll have Matthew confirm it. I think it's 27 they can take. Someone in the chat may already know this, and if you have that, throw that in there. I've been too busy following the prospects along early on, but yeah, 27 guys going to Europe. Thank you. So with that said, though, these 24, when you get back stateside, then you got to figure out who you drop off. And I have kind of an early idea of what I would do. I think Matthew may differ on that. And, it could come down, I guess there's a couple factors there. You're going to keep 3 goalies. I don't think that that's wise, but they may have to at least sit on a third goalie for a little bit if they have a feeling that they want Levi up and they don't want to send Reimer through waivers. I don't know. But we'll get into all that here when Matthew hops in. Then obviously UPL and Levi were the 2 goalies in that group. And kind of interesting, I noticed that Lindy said something today, and I guess it's kind of a no-brainer, given how UPL was one of the best goalies in the NHL, frankly, from January on last season, got the big contract. He's being paid like a number 1 right now. But, to me, I could easily see Devin Levi coming in and really pushing UPL hard, like right away. I think he's got that game in him. I know that we saw Levi last year and maybe he could still use more adjustment time, but Lindy said that, and I wrote it down, when Devin steps in, I guess it's not big news that he said that by any means, but I just thought it was kind of interesting where, there's obviously no competition. UPL's year 1 and it makes sense, but I just think that it's not a done deal that it's going to be like that all season. I could see Levi coming in really pushing. I think he's got the talent. I know some don't see it. I do. I just wanted to put that out there because that's kind of a storyline that maybe we're not really talking about because it's assumed given the contract that UPL got. But I don't know, man. I think that there's something there where Levi is going to apply immediate pressure, maybe force his way into more starts, and maybe many of us realize. We'll see on that though. But at any rate, So captaincy, that was also talked about today. I think it's kind of a no-brainer now that Rasmus Dahlin is the guy that's going to get the C. They're likely going to. I think that Adam said that they're going to do it when they're over in Europe. And Dahlin, look, I mean, Dahlin was golfing with Kevin Adams. I think, last year when they traded Okposo, I think it was in one of those Beyond Blue and Golds that, the first call that Kevin Adams made was to Rasmus Dahlin. And so a lot of implications there that Dahlin's the guy. Lindy has to get a feel for it, make sure that's the right move. I think that he already kind of knows where it's going. Dahlin organized the skate that a lot of Sabres took that participated in over in Europe this summer. Makes sense. But then I think the leadership group after Dahlin is kind of open for debate. And I can see Dylan Cousins getting an A this year. I've said it often going back to the end of last season. I just think he's a natural born leader. I think part of the reason maybe that he struggled a little bit was not only the pressure of having that big contract handed to him, but he just was trying to do too much. He was trying to almost force his leadership onto the team last year. But I just think that he will be rewarded with an A. And then the next A, I'm looking at it in a traditional sense with a captain and two A's, two assistant captains or associates, whatever you want to call them. I'm kind of thinking that, and I don't know if I'm all the way there yet on Tage. I don't think Tage needs to have a letter to lead, but I think that they'll give him one. I think Thompson's kind of an interesting one, but an honorable mention and maybe a sneaky candidate to be in that leadership group for me. And I don't know how the chat feels about this, so I'm kind of eager to see your thoughts on this, but I think Mattias Samuelsson would be an interesting one. He's been a leader at the National Team Development Program, was a leader at Western Michigan, just kind of a quiet guy, but well-liked, well-respected, plays an honest game, leads by example. Hopefully he can stay healthy where that leadership is more valuable to the team as opposed to, only being out there and pushing your leadership on your teammates for 65, 68 games in the schedule. But I think that Samuelsson is one that I would look at. I think Lindy likes him. He speaks highly of him. So I don't know. We'll see how that shakes out. I'm really kind of curious to see what they do there, but I think it's a foregone conclusion that Dahlin is the next captain of the Sabres. I think that's a no-brainer. I see Tuck a lot in here. I get it. I totally get it. I think that when Tuck first got to Buffalo, him growing up a Sabres fan, the whole deal, a lot of fans thought that he could even be captain of the team. I could see him maybe being in there. For me, I just don't feel it. I think there's other candidates, honestly. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it happened. Not for me personally, not for me, but yeah. So real deal prime. I kind of expect this. Samuelsson gets too hurt too much to be an A. I get it. I think though the fabric of the human being, the fabric of the player, I think he has leadership qualities that would be worth it if he could stay healthy. But I totally get the comment from Real Deal Prime. And while we're waiting, we'll just kind of continue to cruise through the chat. Because, doing this show without a net is not the easiest thing in the world. So we'll make it conversational. I did start some things while we were waiting to get going, and we'll just cruise through those. And we'll go back to a prospect real quick. Kris has been posting a lot about Poltapov. Are the Sabres allowed to talk to him while he's under contract in the KHL? Do we know the Sabres' intentions? So Poltapov has been excellent in the first, I guess he's 5 games in, 5 or 6. I think they played 5. They play again tomorrow. Seska does, but been on a tear offensively. And this is kind of the next stage of his development. The Sabres can do Zoom meetings with their prospects. I think it's hard to really get FaceTime with them in person, but they can. They were doing it with Novikov, for example, when he was playing with Dynamo Moscow. The assumption is that they do it with Poltapov while he's with Seska. They just don't get that FaceTime. Sabres have their Russian scout, Ruslan, who I think does communicate with him, but he's not really in a player development role. But I think there's messages that they could take to him firsthand through Ruslan. But the Sabres' intentions, I think it's going to be pretty clear just with the style of play, the speed that he plays at. He is regularly their fastest player in CSKA. So CSKA measure, or the KHL rather, they measure the average speed of each player every game. Poltapov is generally either the fastest or, right up there every game. So with that said, I think the Sabres, would have intentions of getting him in right away, the quickest they can. It's going to be up to Poltapov to control his own fate and see what he wants to do. He's making about 138 grand in American dollars this year. It's 12 million rubles in the KHL. And if money matters, he could maybe take another 1-year deal and make good bank. But I also know that he has designs on playing in the NHL at some point. He's going to come over when he's ready. And I think right now, if the early indications in his KHL season, 6 games in, he's had 3 goals and 6 assists, or any indication, I think he's going to accomplish a lot this year and prove that he's ready to make the jump. So we'll see how that goes. So without further ado, we are joined now by Matthew Fairburn, Sabres writer from The Athletic, co-host of the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show. It is no longer the Baker Hockey Show. So
my apologies.
About you, Matt. I don't have your mic working.
Can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
Hold on.
Can you guys hear Matt in the chat? It could be my headphones.
Can you guys hear me? Am I live?
I can't hear you, Matt, but it could be me. They can hear you.
People can hear me.
I'll switch. I'll switch out.
Apologies for the late arrival here. I don't even know how late I am, but bedtime in the Fairburn household was much longer than usual tonight. So a long day got a little bit longer. Can you hear me now, Kris? You got me?
Yeah, I got you. My earbuds just weren't working, so they were only for show. So I put the old cans on, baby.
Kris, apologies to the chat. Thank you, Kris, for steering the ship while I got things settled here. But we're settled in. What have we been talking about?
We don't need you, man. I covered everything. I covered the lines. I covered the captaincy. I covered the goofy preseason schedule a little bit. But no, let's just go up to the top. I didn't get into Dahlin. I didn't get into I wasn't down there. So you were down at camp today. But just to kind of recap what we did talk about, just kind of went over the sketch of the lines that were shared in your article, your notebook from The Athletic today. Talked about how, and you can share your opinion on the D. We'll get to that. I don't think that we have any clarity on what the D pairs could be until we get Dahlin out there. But let's just actually start with Dahlin. So you were down there. It was pretty early in practice. Can you just kind of tell the people with, your firsthand sourcing what happened with Dahlin, and if you're hearing anything? I don't know if you've heard anything else outside of what they called a middle body injury, which is what, ruptured belly button.
Yeah, middle body, I guess, would not lower, but middle. He was making a pass, and it sounds like felt something, some sort of discomfort. So mid body making a pass. I mean, your guess there is as good as mine. I mean, it sounded somewhat precautionary. Lindy Ruff was lighthearted talking about it afterwards. Seems like they're gonna evaluate it a little bit more, but that maybe it was just a precaution. Anytime, of all players, that's the guy I think they can least afford to lose, for any extended period of time. I think he's their best player. He's their leader, and not the news you want, very quickly into practice before you've even brought the Zamboni out to cut the ice. You're already shuffling some things up, but they'll do some testing and we'll learn more. Right now, not something I think that you want to sound the panic alarm on, but it is one of those Sabres things, right? Hockey's about to start. People are getting excited, and the best player has a little injury to start things off. So we'll see what happens, but that's the latest right now. There was a lot of people asking me about Tage Thompson because he came up a little gingerly after getting hit by Peyton Krebs at one point. He seems,
which I love, by the way. I love I love it. I like
right,
it.
that's kind of what you want, right? But
Mhm.
like he, to my eye, was fine. He came and talked to us afterwards, and he seemed totally fine. He was laughing about the hit, and so I think if there was anything significant there, they would have mentioned it. The only other injuries were the ones that happened during the prospect challenge, which you might have touched on. Tyson Kozak had an upper body injury. Norwin Panoka had an injury that I believe was lower body. Those are guys that were not in the first practice group. And that first practice group is essentially the NHL roster at this point because they are heading over to Europe and they wanted to really pare things down pretty quickly. So that's the latest and greatest on the injury front.
So let's stay on Dahlin real quick before we get to the forwards and Krebs. Did recap the Krebs contract. We'll get into that in a second. But while we were waiting for you to get down here, I did get into the captaincy and mentioned that it's a foregone conclusion, obviously, that Rasmus Dahlin is what are we saying? 2-1, 2-1.
Yeah,
I
maybe
mean,
even
what?
stronger. I
Yeah,
mean,
probably stronger. Yeah, exactly. I mean, but so like I think it's established that Dahlin's the guy, but I shared my 2 A's with an honorable mention, and we didn't discuss this yet. So the chat has already gotten my thoughts on that. Who are yours to put you on the spot?
I would go with Tage and Tuck as
Tage and
my
Tuck.
2 A's. Tuck is the easy one. I think Tage is the other choice for me. There are other candidates. This was something actually that came up in a mailbag recently at The Athletic because it seems like I always get a question about the next captain, and sometimes there's people like it's obviously going to be Dahlin, right? And then it's like, when are they naming Tuck the captain? So there is still a group that really wants to see Tuck as the captain. But when I got that question, I thought,
Including this chat too, I think. Well, not captain, but I think A.
I
Yeah.
think he is a slam dunk for an A. He's got longevity you know, within the team, which sounds weird to say because he hasn't been here all that long, but with so many new faces, he does have a little bit of longevity. He's an older player. He is arguably the most well-liked player on the team. He sort of represents somebody from outside the organization, not drafted and developed here, coming in and embracing it and really embracing this city. And he has the personality that guys gravitate to. He's naturally somebody that I think can lead. And I've started to feel similarly about Tage Thompson, but I do think there is an opening. I think so many of these guys are so young and everything is still pretty new with Kyle Okposo gone that Lindy Ruff and Kevin Adams both have mentioned wanting to see these guys, and particularly Lindy Ruff wanting to be on the ice with these guys and wanting to be around them in the locker room and wanting to get a feel for who guys gravitate to. And that could be different. That could be, that could throw a wild card. I don't think it's going to throw a wild card in the captaincy because I think guys have been following Dahlin and he has been the guy over the summer gathering, people for workouts. There's a contract component there. He's your best player component. He's the most competitive player. I don't anticipate Lindy Ruff feeling differently when he sees these guys up close, but I do think the A's are interesting. I think he's going to want somebody that he can lean on for input, somebody that's a little bit older that can, help Dahlin a little bit. And that's where Tuck comes in, and Tage Thompson is now one of the older players too. So could a young player like Dylan Cousins or Matthias Samuelsson emerge into that group? Maybe.
Those are 2 names that I threw out there, and I throw them out there both ahead of Tuck.
Both
And I
ahead
get
of
everything
Tuck.
that both ahead of Tuck. I get the whole likability of Tuck. I get all of that. I've just never felt that he's a guy that you like would wear you see if Dahlin gets hurt, or I don't know. I'm not there. It's just a personal preference. I totally understand the argument. I wouldn't be surprised if he's in that leadership group at all. Part of me expects it because it's like almost too obvious on the optics. I don't know. I don't want to get into like the details for why, like all the fine details of why I don't feel it. It's not for me. It's just not for me.
So
I don't think he needs a letter to lead. He's another guy that doesn't need a letter to lead.
I think you're right about that. I think I've brought it up here on this show before that I don't think Tuck will be in any way put off by the fact that Dahlin is the captain. Like conversations I've had with him about Dahlin, I think he is, recognizes and is on board, with that guy being the leader. It is interesting because what you bring up, I guess the one counterpoint to Tuck for me is that this is something Don Granato brought up at one point. He is such a positive, happy-go-lucky guy. Alex Tuck is. He's at his best when he is bringing this positive energy all the time into the rink. And there were times where he got real down when he was hurt or, and there is a responsibility that comes with wearing a letter that can wear on certain guys. And I think there was a hesitation from Granato in particular, because he knows Tuck so well, to not make him be the guy that had to talk after every single loss, or not make him be the guy that had to be on his teammates, when he is by nature sort of this. He's actually said to me one time that he feels like he's a bit of a people pleaser. And so he's always, trying to make everybody happy. And he's a leader in that regard, but maybe that's not, to your point, a letter guy. I tend to think you're not going to stop him from talking after most games because he's the go-to guy. He's, the best quote in the room. And so we're going to go up to talk to him. And whether he's wearing a letter or not, he's going to be that guy for a lot of games.
Go back to last year at locker cleanout day. Tuck was the guy, he just parroted everything that Kevin said, craving accountability. Like, wait a minute. If you're a leader, you're not craving accountability. You're creating accountability. There was one guy on locker cleanout last year, didn't have a great season, but was trying to create accountability. And it was Cousins. I think that I put him way above Tuck in the leadership group on this team. And also it's nice to have that next wave of it. He's still a young guy, but he has a track record also of being a captain. A lot of these guys, like when they make it to the NHL, a lot of times they're captains of their team and, peewees and bantam, you know what I mean? Right. But Cousins has leadership all over him to me. I don't know. I think about that a lot. The end of last year. I don't know, man. I just don't feel it with Tuck. But anyways, we don't have to beat that up. I mean, we can talk about it when they name the leadership core. They said they're going to do it in Europe, right?
I don't know that they put a timetable on it.
Okay.
But they're going to do it. They are going to have it in place for that first game, they did say.
Okay. Okay.
But whether that means they name it before they jump on the plane or while they're over there, I'm not entirely sure. Cousins, the point I'll make a couple points on Cousins. I agree with you. At the end of the season, he was the guy and he was also the guy in the middle of the season, remember, calling them out for their playing style and being too soft. He recognized
in a shitty season. That's what a captain kind of does.
Yeah, he is one that has been feeling like since he got into this organization, like he wanted a letter on his chest. He fought in his first game. And the only hesitation I have on Cousins is that it seems like at least last season he was in his head so much. Maybe a letter helps him kind of, come into his own or get out of his head in some ways, but he was in his head a lot. It seemed like, whether it was about the contract, and living up to that big cap number, whether it was, really wanting to make the playoffs or the injury early in the season, throwing him off, and he was pressing for offense and his defensive game was suffering. Like, I kind of want Dylan Cousins to just focus on being the best player he can be, because I consider him one of the most pivotal pieces to this team. Which direction he goes, can he take that next step? Can he get back to being a 30-goal player, or can he be a two-way type of player that maybe he's not giving you 30, but what he's giving you defensively makes him one of your most valuable players? I view him as a future letter wearer almost without a doubt. But in this current moment, that's a question. But it is, and this is why you take your time with these things and you don't rush. I on the spot said Tage and Tuck, but you think about that. Removing those letters is difficult, right?
Mhm.
Once you put them on. Tage and Tuck aren't going anywhere. Dahlin's not going anywhere. So you put them on certain guys. Although Lindy has rotated them around, he's done some unconventional things with his captaincies. And Lindy is real high on Dylan Cousins. Like, I think
He's a Lindy Ruff type of player.
He really likes what they have in Dylan Cousins. And I'll throw another name into the, leadership group, if you will, is Dylan Cousins' pal, Bo Byram. I think he is a natural leader that just needs time to acclimate with this group and get comfortable. Again, a lot of these guys, what you would really like, and it's why Dahlin, he's got the combination of, I don't think he's one of the few guys that didn't have a down year last year, and he has all the intangibles that we talk about that you want in somebody who's wearing a letter. A lot of these guys, it's like you'd really like them to bounce back first, or you'd really like Matthias Samuelsson to stay healthy first. Samuelson's an absolute glue guy in that room too.
Mm-hmm.
Part of me almost wonders if you'd go. I don't think they would. He's on a 1-year deal. You never know. But like somebody like Zucker, right? That's been around.
Yeah,
he feels a little too transient in the last few years of his career, and
yeah,
I think he's more to your point about guys who don't need a letter to lead. He doesn't need a letter.
He's fine without it. Yeah, he's fine without it.
He can be a passenger in that regard, and his veteran presence will help. But yeah, that's probably the end of the names that I would consider.
So formally, I put Dahlin with Cousins, and I did go Tage, even though I'm not all the way there on Tage. I just think that I can see Lindy putting that letter on his chest to kind of bring more out of him, making him take more on. But I did put an honorable mention with Samuelsson. Samuelson's definitely a leader. He's been a leader, World Juniors, Western Michigan, national team program. But also a lot of the things that you said about Tuck and the likability in the room and everything else, that's how Samuelsson is, to your point, without, I think, some of the other, I've heard things from Tuck, I think that they're not captaincy leadership for me, but again, I don't want to beat the dead horse there. Let's talk about the forwards. So I did go through Peterka, Thompson, Tuck, Benson, Cousins, Quinn with Kulik mixing in. I talked a little bit about Kulik when I was killing some time. Zucker, McLeod, Greenway with Krebs mixing in a little there, and then Malenstein, Lafferty, Obey, Kubel with Krebs mixing in there too. Now, when Krebs was mixing in on the third and fourth line, was he doing it at a mix of center and wing?
Where was Krebs mixing a little bit of both to my eye. He was on the third line at one point at the same time as McLeod, and seemed to be in a few different spots on that fourth line. This is all preliminary, right? Like it was all pretty rough. They weren't doing a ton of line rushes and things like that. It wasn't super, a super consistent part. There was a lot of mixing and matching, but the most consistent groupings, guys wearing the same colored jerseys, all that sort of thing. That was the best sketch I could get. Good jumping off point. Definitely that. I think some of the big questions we had was how, like, the top six would be grouped, right? Are they going to stick with Peterka? Right now, it appears like they will. And then who gets that other top six spot on the wing? Looks like Benson, but Kulik is absolutely in that mix. And then, Krebs is battling for a spot, which I think is what we probably expected. Once we started to look at the depth chart after free agency, particularly after the McLeod trade, that put Peyton Krebs on notice. But then he gets this 2-year contract at $1.45 million per year. And you start to think they do have a plan for him, but there's not an obvious spot right now. I don't think he's locked in at center. I think Lindy Ruff is definitely likes the idea of Malenstein, Lafferty, Obey-Kubel
Yeah, I'm not disturbing that. Yep.
on that bottom line, and I like that. Like, I think that is the idea, right? That's why you brought those players in. They're all fast. They all hit. They all can, play in their own end. Obey-Kubel and Malenstein have played together. So
they were really good together.
I think really good together. And when you're talking about an identity on a fourth line, that's what they've harped on, is that the value of that group can be the physical. They may only play 10 minutes, but those are going to be a hard 10 minutes for the opponent to play. Well, guess what? I think if you put Krebs between those two, the opponent's glad you did.
Yeah. So here, let's
stop. So? And that's 100%. Not a knock on Krebs. I just think he's easier. There's something about having those three really fast, really physical players that Krebs is not super fast. And while he's a willing checker, he has not yet proven that he is a punishing one. And those three all are. And so I think any opponent that saw Lafferty out of the lineup or Obey-Kubel out of the lineup and Krebs inserted is feeling differently about that line.
Yeah. So I guess there's a couple things that come to mind. So, and we talked a little bit about this, I think, when we recapped free agency, when they made the signings after they had already acquired Malenstein, they went and got Obey-Kubel and Lafferty. That's the biggest no-brainer line combination that you can put together. So you're starting at the bottom of your lineup, but you're building your lines from the bottom, and it gives you all this flexibility on your, with your third centerman, your second centerman, and your top centerman. Mix and match wings all over the place. We talked about it with the Zucker thing, right? Do you put Zucker with Cousins and Quinn? We're like, no, don't disrupt how they ended the year, because that Benson component was really good with Cousins and Quinn, right? Krebs. Well, I guess a couple things. Maybe last year you're doing the opposition a favor by putting Krebs on that line, but maybe did he get bigger, right? Because that's one of the things where, like, let's ask Tage, did he catch him good? Did Krebs catch him good? Is he going to do that every game? Is he going to do that every shift? Because maybe the narrative changes a little bit.
It could.
Who knows, right? Who knows?
It absolutely could. And that's why I say the willingness is there. The attitude is there. There is that tenacity in his game and maybe a chip on his shoulder.
What did he put on for weight? So I put up Tom's comment here. I don't know if we know this yet, and I don't want to have you scramble. You've already scrambled, I think, enough tonight. But Tom says, not sure how much stock to put into camp roster seats, but I checked. The boys put on some weight over the summer. The biggest movers were Cousins plus 12 pounds, Rusak plus 11 pounds, Komarov plus 10. Yeah, Komarov's a tank. Power and UPL plus 8, Levi and Rosane plus 7. So if the math has already been done by Tom and it's accurate, that means that Krebs probably didn't put on enough. Back to the discussion we were just having, because you want him to carry a little more weight. Because remember what Krebs said on the last day of cleanout, he needed to get stronger going through guys and knocking guys off the puck, right? And you do that by adding muscle mass. So I'm only throwing that out there saying, and I get what you're saying, by the way, and I'm not sitting here banging the drum to say, yeah, put him on that fourth line, move Lafferty up, or I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, just because Krebs didn't succeed as a fourth liner with Okposo and Gergensons doesn't mean he couldn't play on that line if he had to, I guess is what I'm saying. It's not ideal, but I can see
that he did not succeed, because they were a good defensive line. So it's not as if it would be a major sigh of relief from the opponent. It's just that fast physical element that you want to see is not
in the traditional fourth line sense. Yeah, absolutely.
right. And in
If this
terms of
team's
what it seems like
scoring,
they have a vision for.
yes, well, exactly. That's kind of what it came up with this, Matthew, this comment here. So I hit on this when you were making your way in with Rory Jeffrey's comment saying, is Kulik more likely to make the team as a two left wing with Cousins and Quinn, or the third wing with McLeod and Zucker? And I said, basically it's top six or bust for him. And I'm pretty sure you agree.
I thought about the third line, over the weekend when we were watching them in the prospect challenge, and it's a matter of what they want in that third line. Do they want the identity to somewhat mirror what they're getting in the fourth line, or do they want scoring? Because I think if you want scoring, I mean, Zucker can bring some of that. He would have to unseat Greenway in that scenario, or unseat one of the fourth liners, and Greenway goes to the fourth line. But Greenway's not fast either. So it's a little bit tricky to see that. But if they wanted to add a scoring touch to that third line, not to say that Kulik is proven in that regard, but he clearly has the scoring potential. Seeing the first practice, I think I'm with you, where it seems they are thinking top six or go play on the top line in Rochester.
Well, I think it's also the commentary going back to last season where Kevin Adams was saying we need to build an identity in our bottom six. He wasn't saying build an identity on our bottom line. He was saying build an identity in the bottom six. I think that's the answer to the question that you posed. Do they want scoring, or do they want that third line to play like the fourth line? I think that's the answer. And that's why I'm kind of there with Kulik saying, yeah. And plus, Kulik is a top six forward when he's fully mature all day long. Anyways, he's working his way there. That's where he's going to be. There's no sense in burying him now. And I think the whole bottom six mentality, fast, hard, kind of having six guys that play that way, is how it's going to be until your top six is blowing the doors off offensively, because then you can change things around. Then you can have three lines that get it cooking offensively and have one line that might have a little more juice offensively, but they're going to be fast and hard at the same time. That's the kind of the modern, that's what a lot of good teams do now. Is they have three lines that cook and one that just goes balls to the wall, hard to play against. And a lot of them actually still can score, but not 3 20-goal guys. I'm just saying they can all put pucks in the net. So I don't know. But anyways, you said something that made me want to get back to that Kulik question, because I had already covered it. I think now you're fully caught up. The first 20 minutes that I did, I think that you're fully there now. So the only other thing that I think we talked about the captaincy, talked about goaltending real quick. So, the 24 players in Group 1, that was with 2 goalies today, they can take 27 to Europe. So I think the 24 that were there on the ice, the 22 skaters with UPL and Levi, who are the other 3 that you envision going with the team overseas?
I would say James Reimer is probably going to be that guy. Ryan Johnson, to have an extra defenseman, especially because Dahlin's hurt. And then either Lukáš Rusek or Isak Rosen. And, you brought up Rosen when we were talking earlier. I think Rusek, because I guess it just depends what you need if somebody goes down. But if a scoring type player goes down, right, you have the extra in either Kulik or Benson, whoever is not playing. And then if somebody in the bottom 6 goes down, I mean, you still have Krebs, right, waiting there. But I think if I need a bottom 6 player tomorrow, I want Rusek, not Rosen.
So on the D part, though, maybe you can take both Rosen and Rusek, because if you have Bryson and Gilbert not in your top 6, you have 8D that go. Then you don't need Johnson. Maybe you can take 2 spare forwards with Krebs, as assuming Krebs is kind of the odd guy out right now.
As long as Dahlin is healthy. or as long as
Right.
everybody's
Right.
healthy, on defense. And so that injury made me think, okay, maybe they, bring another guy. Dennis Gilbert to me was I saw some questions about this and people wondering or people sketching out deep pairs with Ryan Johnson included before training camp started. But to me, there was always a role that they envisioned for Dennis Gilbert. And I think he is pretty comfortable, at least going to Europe and probably beyond that. And I think Ryan Johnson starts the year in the AHL. The fact that he was playing in that rookie tournament after playing 40 NHL games is probably a little bit of a hint of how they feel there. Still a guy that, obviously both of us really liked what he did last year and,
Mhm.
the type of player he can become. Great that he got a taste of it for 40 games, but adding Gilbert, it's clear they wanted something there. Like Gilbert brings something much different than what Ryan Johnson brings in terms of physicality.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I think that was important to them. And I wrote about this and, with the caveat that the defensive pairs are a bit of a guessing game because Dahlin wasn't on the ice. And so, it's tough to figure out exactly what they have in mind there. But we did see some Byram with Yoki Haru. We saw when Byram was with Yoki Haru, that meant Samuelson was with Power. We've also seen Samuelson a little bit with Clifton. Like my best guess was Byram, Dahlin, Power, Yoki Haru, Samuelson, Clifton, Gilbert as the extra. What
Mhm.
I like Byram, Dahlin. Like if I'm starting at the top, that's what I like the best. I think when they were at their best, right when Byram came over in the trade, that looked like a potentially electric pair. I think
Yep.
Byram got overcoached and in his head a little bit about different systems and things like that and really needed a reset. I think Lindy Ruff will be good for him, and I think if they can find a way to use him, properly, I think they could have a really good player there. The idea of Power and Dahlin is intriguing, but I just like Byram Dahlin a little bit better, probably because if you really wanted to, you could put Power on the right and have Samuelson come up and play with him if you want that to be your top four. But you also, the flexibility Dennis Gilbert gives you, because obviously if you're going Byram, Dahlin, Samuelson, Power, you have all four of your lefties. And now your two righties are playing together. And we know Clifton can't play the left. And I don't think Lindy Ruff is as thrilled with the idea of lefty righty or, you know, not having lefty righty. Don Granato didn't seem to care, but I think, that would be the preference if you could get it with Lindy Ruff. But Gilbert gives you the option to basically have it be whoever's playing the best out of, the two of the three between Gilbert, Clifton, and Yoki Haru who are playing the best get in the lineup. And you can have Gilbert play with either Clifton or Yoki Haru, or you have Samuelson move down to that pair, play with Clifton, and have Yoki Haru play with Power, Byram with Dahlin. But it's a
Yeah,
weird,
I'm not doing
puzzle.
Clifton, uh, Yoki Haru.
No, like
That's a non-starter.
I just don't think you
Um,
want, unless you're late in the game and you're shortening your bench, right? And you're playing,
yeah.
one of those guys isn't even playing and you're just rotating five or something. But that's where I think you end up with Gilbert in the lineup, right? You would have probably
Mhm.
Clifton come out or Yoki Haru come out and you would have Gilbert in. And I think they're comfortable with that. I know he didn't get a big salary, but I do believe that they have some faith that in the right role he can be useful for them. So I'm still interested to see how that all shakes out, but that's my best guess at a very scattered group back there today.
So when they get back from Europe and they got to get down to 23, what are they going to do? They're going to keep 3? You're going to keep Reimer up? Do you think some of it's dependent on what the goalie situation is around the league, like what Vancouver does, what a couple of these other teams do if there's injuries. Do they send Levi down, let him play? I made a comment when you had gotten in yet that Lindy said today, he said when Devin gets in, and I'm sitting there saying, okay, so there's no competition, and I know it makes sense, right? UPL got the contract. He was good last year, the second half of the year. I get it. But I still think that Levi could damn well come in and like be really good pretty quickly and push UPL and get more starts than we realize. I think it's possible. We don't know how UPL is going to react. Is he going to have a Cousins type of scenario where the money gets to him and he doesn't perform as well as he did last year? Is he not going to perform as well because he's got Levi here nipping at him? We don't know, right? We have to see it. But I thought it was kind of interesting. But, will they send Levi down? Will they keep 3 for a little bit? What do you think? What's your guess? And I know a lot of, we have to see how, I know it's the first day of camp. I get it. But to me, it's I think there's an answer. You can probably keep Kulik up. I'm looking at the group of 24 right now. You have to lop one from the 24 guys that were in group 1 today. Bryson was in that group, right?
Bryson was in that group, and he's the easy one.
Bryson goes down for me. Yeah.
Absolutely. 100%.
But okay, so he's one. He's one, and then probably Reimer.
Well, Reimer wasn't even in the group, right? So
that's what I mean. So if you add Reimer to it, then you have 25, so you got to lop 2.
Right.
That's what
So that's where I think you can do Bryson, to me, is pretty easy to get you down to 23 with that group. If you have then it becomes a decision of Reimer or Kulik.
And Kulik, yeah.
And to your point, if the goalie situation around the league suggests that James Reimer might get claimed, then you have the option of waivers you don't have to put Kulik through waivers, so you can just put him in the AHL for a little while. But some of this will have to be performance dependent, right? Like if Kulik is crushing it and he's, part of your team, then you're not going to want to send him down and you're not going to want to have him out of the lineup,
Do you think, do you think that Levi being in that group and Reimer not being in the first group is indicative of the 1-2? That's how, if that's their group, their NHL roster right now, does that tell us that they already are planning on keeping Levi up? Because we talked about it before, maybe they send Levi down, keep Reimer up. Levi is your org 2, but he would be the AHL 1 and they can shuttle him up. Do you think there's tea leaves to be read there?
I think there's a chance we'll see Reimer in that group on some of these practice days. That remains to be seen. But I would say if I were handicapping it right now, who plays those 2 games in Prague? It's UPL and Levi. And so in that sense, that's why I think he's with that group. And I think look, a lot has been made about Lindy Ruff and his, we can't read too much into Lindy Ruff's 1.0 tenure in Buffalo, right? Because the league and the game were very different. And, Paul Hamilton from WGR has asked a few goalie questions to Lindy and along those lines about how Luukkonen likes to play a lot of games and showed that he could do it last year. And, Lindy used to like having a goalie that played a lot of games, but that used to be the standard in the NHL. That used to just be how it's done. And I think Lindy is very open to the idea, not even just open to it, accepting of the idea that it needs to be closer to a 50-50 split because of the way the schedule is set up. I also think Lindy Ruff, fresh in his mind, is the fact that he would be coaching the other team in Prague, potentially, if he did not have a goalie problem last season. And to your point, if Luukkonen looks shaky, which we only need to go back 12 months to remember that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if he looks not like the second half of the season, Luukkonen, and Levi looks good, absolutely Lindy Ruff is going to go to Levi. If there's not going to be nearly as much tiptoeing around the psychology component, I don't think, of any of these players, right?
Mm-mm.
And that was a big deal under Don Granato, but I think that's sort of out the window at this point. Like Lindy Ruff
Good.
wants to win. Lindy Ruff
Good.
wants to win,
Yeah.
and he's got a lot on the line. Like he came back and I do not buy into the idea that he's putting his legacy on the line because his legacy is cemented, as, really one of the most beloved Sabre players and coaches of all time. But he is putting a piece of his legacy on the line, right? He's got a reputation. Like he's a prideful guy. Like he didn't come here to just, be the latest coach to miss the playoffs. Like he wants this and he wants to be the guy that fixes it. And
He
so
didn't at first. Did you see the Beyond Blue and Gold or whatever, the blueprint
he did
where
not at first. Yeah,
he said that he didn't want the job at first.
right. Yeah, he initially said no. He needed to be taught, his initial reaction was no. So, but he, I guess point being, he's not going to sit here and play the long game or be like, oh, UPL's confidence, this or that. Like if Levi's out playing him, I think Levi will play. And I think there's also an element of if Reimer's out playing Levi, obviously Luukkonen can't go anywhere. He's on your roster with that contract. But if Reimer's out playing Levi, same thing. That's part of why Reimer is there, to provide some competition to Levi, or at least some insurance.
Did they put Hauser on the training camp roster?
Yes, Hauser's on
They
the
did.
training
So
camp
the 5,
roster.
okay. All right. I was gonna say because they had to have 5. I couldn't remember if he was on there. Okay, just because when they split, because I was looking at the preseason schedule, right? So let's just recap that real quick. Sabres kick off preseason on Saturday, 7:00 against Pittsburgh. Back in action Monday against Columbus. Then the following night they go to Pittsburgh. That's Tuesday the 24th. Thursday the 26th, Buffalo goes to Ottawa. And so that's probably going to be the first game of the split squad, right? Because their game in Munich against Red Bull is on the 27th. So when do they leave for Europe? Do you know?
Yes. So let me pull up the calendar.
Sorry to put you on the spot. They got to be leaving probably that Tuesday or something.
They
right?
leave Tuesday night because they practice in Munich on Wednesday. They get off the plane and practice. So it's the 24th they leave. I believe it's at night. So
that's split squad. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's going to be a few preseason games where you're
going to see the B team on the 24th in Pittsburgh, the 26th, obviously at Ottawa. Then you'll see the A team. So we probably won't see the A team again until that Munich game. Okay.
I think so. To give you an idea, you asked if Hauser was here. Luukkonen and Levi were in the first group. Sandstrom and Reimer were in the second group. Hauser, Ratzlaff, and Leanders were in the third group.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what, 7 goalies? Is that 7 goalies? Yeah, 7. So they will presumably send one or both of those guys back to juniors. You'd bring 3 over to, you'd still have enough. So it's going to be mostly the Rochester Americans playing those preseason games, and the Rochester staff will be running that. Unfortunately for Vinny Prospel, who I'm sure would have liked a trip to Prague. But so from a goaltending standpoint, I think you still need to have Reimer in Prague, because if you have an injury, you need him. So, and they're over there for 13 days. So injuries could happen. It's Oktoberfest too, while they're in Munich, and who knows what could happen. You got to have a third goal.
Yeah, I think so. So before we go to the chat, I don't know if you've seen anything or if you've starred anything. I kind of went through some of the ones that I had already starred, but wanted to ask you about the new video board. And I usually don't care about this stuff. You know what I mean? Like at the end of the day, like they could play in, Kaz rink, and as long as they were winning games, who cares? But I know that they needed a new roof. They got to redo the seating and stuff like that. But that video board's massive. I saw the pictures today. I haven't been in the arena. Yeah, like when I was down there, I was just at Harbor Center, right? But that video board, I texted you. I kept thinking like Tony Ludman back in the day, when he'd clear the zone, backhand, moonshot, high up. If Tony Ludman was still playing for this league, his backhand clearing would hit that video board. I don't think there's any question. Does it look low to the ice?
You texted me that, and I looked and I thought it could. Like it could.
Like we've seen a couple punts at AT&T Stadium hit that giant Jerry Jones, Jerryland video board. I could see some pucks hitting that thing.
I'm not ruling it out. I definitely, you don't see too much of that. The big looping clearing pass. You see it, I feel like, a handful of times a season. But as soon as you texted that, I thought I'm now hoping that happens, because that would be pretty funny. It does. I don't know if it just feels really low because it's so much bigger, and it's hard having not freshly been in a ton of NHL arenas. Like it's been 6 months or so since the season. I'm trying to remember how low some of the other ones are and how some of those ones sit. I mean, it's quite a big board, and it's nice, and it's up to the standard around the league, but it might be a touch low. As long as it doesn't fall on the ice, I think it's all right. As long as it stays in one piece, then life is good.
The Skinner board. All right, I'll throw some chats up. We're already an hour 6 in. Brian Cummings, welcome back for season 2. Brian Cummings, he writes, Cousins hasn't established his level yet. Went from 13 to 31 to 18. I'd like to think he's going to be around 30 consistently, but until it's done, it's not done. Still a young player. I've said it before. I'll say it one last time heading into the season. I have zero concerns about Dylan Cousins. I know some do. I think Cantor in the chat, I think, was a little down on Cousins. I'm not, ideally, yeah, he'd be around 30 consistently, like Cummings suggests. I'm not really saying that. I just think total value of the team. I think he'll score more than 18 regularly. I don't know if he's a regular 30. That'd be great if he is. But long-term total value to the team, I have zero concerns about him, especially if he has an A on his chest.
Bill asks if they're going to go through a bigger city or if they're going to be flying on a private plane. They will be on a private plane. I will not. I will have to go through Amsterdam, I think, to get to Prague. But they will be on a private plane that I believe goes right to Prague. It sounds like going to fly through the night and then just practice on Wednesday. Unlike the Bills last year going to London, they do have some time to acclimate, obviously. They will be in Europe for over a week before they play games that matter. So that is the good news, and the fact that they don't have to fly commercial. That's when, I don't know, that would sound some alarm bells. The salary cap was, of course, a topic of conversation today in Kevin Adams' pre-training camp press conference. So if they were flying commercial, it would probably be an even bigger question.
There was a comment in here about Jack Quinn speculating on if Quinn scored 30, what his next contract could look like. And I kind of had a thought on it. I can't find it. If you see it, here it is right here. This was from Blake. If Quinn tears it up, does he get the Raymond deal with an AAV of a shade over $8 million? My thought when I saw that in the chat was, I don't know if Quinn gets that, but if Peterka has another big year, he might, after the year that he had last year. Do you think Peterka can realistically push 8? Cap going up. Sabres have space. Not that really matters, but I don't know. That's a big number. That's a big number. But I mean, if Because I mean, are Quinn and Paterka both going to have similar contracts if they produce similarly this year? Say they're both, 30, 30, 30 goal, 70-point guys. Great problem to have, right? Lofty. Let's say 30-30.
Great problem to have. Absolutely phenomenal problem to have. That means that the bets all paid off, right?
Yeah, right.
Unless
Exactly.
nobody else plays well, and it's
Well, I
just
mean, no
those
one's
two
getting
guys.
if they play like shit. Yeah, no one's getting 8. But I mean, that
Well,
was
no,
my
I mean,
initial thought, though.
no,
Yeah,
I'm
go
saying
ahead.
if those are the only two guys that play well, everybody else still regresses, and you have Quinn and Paterka, just blowing the doors off, and now you're stuck having to pay them, but you also didn't play well as a team. That would be kind of a bad case. I would say Raymond, just looking at the seasons he had leading up to this contract, 2021-22, 23 goals, 57 points in 82
Mhm.
games. 2022-23, 45 points, 17 goals in 74 games. And then last year, 31 goals, 41 points, 72 points in a full 82
That's
games.
why I get to the Paterka thing. Like, he's not too far off.
That's 3 seasons of work, though. And Paterka so far is at, 12 goals, 32 points as a
Mhm.
rookie in 22-23, and 28 goals and 50 points in
It's a
82
pretty good
games last
season.
year, which is a pretty good season, but it's sort of like the
If he gets to 30 and 60, I think he could push 8.
I think
Like,
he'll be
push it.
somewhere between 7 and 8. I think
Yeah.
7 is absolutely realistic for him, and I would almost say 6 is like his floor right now,
I mean, he's gotta do it. We're
essentially.
talking
But
obviously top
he
end,
has
best case
to.
scenario, he's gotta do it. That's I don't wanna, because they haven't even played a preseason game yet. I totally get it. I'm just working on that assumption that, you know, which we shouldn't do after last season, but that he'll keep ascending,
It also depends
kind of
on term,
forecast it.
right?
Yeah,
It depends on, do you go with more of a bridge contract to lower the number, or do you commit
yeah.
to him long term? That's where I think Quinn might be a little bit different because he has, the injury situation the last couple of years that, you know,
I think if there's one more in the tank that they're gonna commit to in that organization, it's JJ Paterka.
yeah, I think they like him a lot. And, they they certainly he's one of the only guys that jumped forward last year, right? Like
Yeah.
and look, he is playing on the top line with Alex Tuck and Tage Thompson. Like if that works, he's going to get paid like it. And it brings up, we don't have to go down the cap space rabbit hole because we did that discussion on the last episode, but it's an interesting point. Today the question was asked, and Kevin Adams brought up that, they have all these RFAs coming up, and that's part of why they got to save the money. And roundabout explanation that I didn't totally land for me because they actually put more of a dent into their cap space with the Skinner buyout next year by doing it this year. But they didn't do these contract extensions yet. They did do that in the past with Power and Dahlin last year, Cousins in season the year before, Tage
Yeah.
Thompson preseason the year before. So I bring that up to say, why have, if that is the main focus and why you're, sort of, you know, in fear of using this money, then why not get ahead of it? Why not try to extend Byram? Do one of these deals because they have Byram, they have Quinn, they have Paterka, they have Devin Levi, which is a sneaky one if he plays well.
Mhm.
He that's a sneaky one if he plays well because he is not going to I think, roll over in contract negotiations based on, how it was coming out of college and the way that he got to jump right into the net, the way he got to jump right into the net last year. Again, good problems to have, right? If guys play well, but you also have Ryan McLeod, Byram.
Yeah.
They're talking about every time Kevin Adams brings up Byram, he talks about how hard it is to get top 4 defensemen, how they were looking for it for years. And now this was the type of guy that they were looking for. So you're already setting the table of like, this is a piece you coveted for a long time. So I don't know if it's that important, then you thought you'd maybe try to get one of them done. You're saying,
And in theory, if you're going to attack the
convinced,
market, well, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If the reason you're not spending money now is because you need to plan for these contracts, then you're convinced. Well, if you're so convinced, why haven't you signed them before the number keeps going up, before the cap keeps going up? Maybe some of these guys don't want to play ball, but over in the summer, Kevin Adams basically said he didn't think he would get those done. Like it didn't sound like a priority to start those negotiations necessarily. So I'm fine with that. I am, because I think they've run into some trouble doing these deals too early, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's okay to make these guys prove it and earn it again, because if Peterka has another 50-point season, that number's different. If Quinn doesn't hit that ceiling that they think he has, the number's different. But it's an interesting logic pretzel.
He should want to get Byram done, I think.
I think so.
Before the season. I think that's the one. I don't think Peterka would even want to do it, because I think he knows the season he had and he has his eye on the prize, and the market's kind of set for similar contracts like we just talked about. Quinn, I think he should want to get done, but Quinn's probably the same way. No, like in his mind, he's already like, he has a lot to prove this year, and he could probably squeeze out a greater AAV by waiting. He should want to get Byram done, but Byram could be the same way as those other guys, saying, yeah, I'm going to wait. I think I can crush it this year.
Well, they're all looking at the cap going up,
mm-hmm.
and they're saying, well, if I have a great year, I think that's the case for all these guys, maybe short of Ryan McLeod. Maybe that's
league-wide.
Maybe that's the one you want to get done, right? Is see if you can get him on a reasonable number and make a bit of a roll of the dice there. But I guess it just falls short for me as the ironclad explanation of you can't spend money now because you need to sign those guys then. Because I am under the impression it's about winning now.
Yeah. Well, and also, if you're going to attack the market, if a dealer or, if an opportunity presents itself to make a deal, maybe you can better attack the market if you have more of your future spending already done. The forecast there's less ambiguity, but needless to say, it's the first day of training camp. I'm just happy that hockey's back. We have a whole year to talk about this stuff. We have a whole year to rank which of these RFAs next year, like what's the order of importance on those. That's going to be a fun one to do all year, because they have a couple key ones, But at any rate, what else do you have here, man? Because I did kick this off by telling people how crappy I feel, and I think I totally nuked it earlier. I took 4 Advil, and it's wearing off. So I'm not going to go much longer.
You're playing hurt already. You're like Dahlin. Here we are, day 1 of training camp, playing hurt. You fought through the broadcast the other night valiantly, by the way.
I did. I didn't let people know I was sick then. I did let my broadcast partner know I was sick, just in case, But at any rate, yeah, I'm starting to sweat.
That's usually a good sign. That's usually when I cut off a podcast. So
we can keep going a little bit more if there are a couple more chat. I mean, it's the beginning of the year. People are hyped up. If you see anything else, let's get through it. I'm not trying to run away just yet.
I think at some point we will do a deep dive on the cap space for next year and what that could look like. That would be a fun, as we kill some time in between some of these preseason games and while the team's, splitting up the squad and stuff. That because there's a few comments of how are they going to afford all these guys. I think it ultimately will sort itself out through performance and a rising cap ceiling, but I don't think it's a grim picture by any means.
And before I forget, actually before you go to Europe, before you stop off in Amsterdam, leave the airport, go and see the town, and then get back. Don't do that. We might not see you again. Homework for the chat is, so I'm going to bring next time we get together. So we'll do at least one more while you're still here before you go over. We got to do some bold predictions for the season. So I'll have like 5. I want the chat to bring theirs. We have fun with that. Let's have fun with that. By then, we'll also have the first 1 or 2 preseason games to digest. By the time, probably only 1. We'll probably we'll figure that out. We'll talk when we're going to do that, but we'll do some bold predictions. And I did throw up the crawler here. So we did get one message. I did not load it to play, but we do have a voicemail in the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show line. But you guys, I just want to get a plug in. Leave us a message. We will play them on the show. We'll do a segment 716-202-9153. That's the Sabres Prospects YouTube channel. I have verified. I can't see your phone number, so don't worry about that. There's no caller ID on that line, so leave a voicemail. You can anything's open on that, and we'll play the good ones. I did want to get a plug in for that. And again, while you're here, like this video, subscribe to the channel. Frank Farkle is right on the money here, by the way, by saying check out the coffee shops. It's kind of where I was going, Frank, but I was like, I'll kind of let it go. Matthew can kind of put it together. But yeah, check out the coffee shops. Check out the gray room. The gray room. But yes. So yeah, we talked about the voicemail line, the drunk dialing line, whatever you guys want to do with it. Let's have fun with it. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. Matthew, you were late coming in. You want to do your plugs? Let the people know what you got cooking, what's up at the Athletic before we get out of here.
Yeah, people can find everything at theathletic.com/Sabres. I have something up from the day one, emptying the notebook from day one of training camp. I had something up yesterday on Krebs. Recently wrote a Komarov story with Scott Wheeler, and
very nicely done.
Broke down rookie camp, and sort of who stood out, sort of a big picture overview. Tried to put on my, and we got to watch a lot of hockey together this weekend,
we
which
did.
was good.
It was good.
So I always
it was
learn
funny
when we watch hockey together, so that's always fun. And so lots of stuff up there. Hockey season is in full swing.
It was really funny. So one of the things that I want to see, so I will be doing kind of along the lines of your piece that you did on the Prospects Challenge of rookie camp. I'll fill in the gap in our content. I'll do a Prospect Avenue podcast where we'll cover kind of my thoughts on the tournament. There were some standouts I thought there. One of the things that you and I talked about the first night when we were in person, I think it was the first game, might've been the second game. There's things that you want to see happen with certain players year over year developmentally. And a lot has been made of Yuri Kulik, his complete game, but he can still tweak the one thing that he's been really good at. And we talked about it. You know where I'm going with this, right? So Kulik is always outside of the dots on, like, he's really wide for his one-timer on the power play. And we were talking about it. I was talking with Andrew Mossbergs about it too. I want to see him inside the dots now, closer to the slot. So you and I were talking about it at one of the games.
That's how he scored against the Devils.
And what happened is, so he came inside, like he was out wide, missed it, moved inside, and that's where he scored from. I want him to remember that, because I think that's huge. Better for rebounds, better shot angle, better for rebounds. When you miss wide, it doesn't carry him and you lose the zone. There's so many benefits. Somebody, I think it might have been Marty Baron last year too, I think he didn't do it about Kulik. He may have done it about Tage, but I think he showed Stamkos and maybe McKinnon Same thing. They set up at the dot or inside the dot. I think Ovechkin's a lot of time outside of the dot. I have to go back and look. For some reason, I think that he's outside. And
If you
he's
can
like,
shoot
you
like
can't.
Ovechkin, you know.
Yeah. And Kulik actually damn near can.
Well,
but
you know, it is interesting you bring that up because I noticed in a lot of the highlights, you know, that the Amerks would post last year, like some of his one-timers, it's like, man, that's coming from way downtown or from way outside, right? Like it's just like hard to picture repeating that maybe in the NHL, but Scott Wheeler, I was watching with him a little bit, and he mentioned he thinks Kulik probably has, you know, one of, if not the best one-timers outside of the NHL right now.
Oh yeah.
And, you know, probably the best. So it's an absolute asset, but it was fun to see him changing things up a little bit, you know, and scoring in some slightly different ways and not just overpowering guys. And there was also a few times, you know, that we noticed, right? Like the compete, all that seems like the strength is all much improved for him. There were still a few times where you're like, all right, finish that check or drive to the net, right? Instead of trying to take it to the middle of the ice. But
Yeah,
there's
that's the last piece for him, is not doing drive-bys on some checks. I want him to kind of get a little more body on body moving forward.
and that's going to be the big challenge in the NHL, you know. And the other piece of it, like simplifying his game, like driving to the net instead of maybe making the extra move to the middle, I think that'll almost come automatically in the NHL once you realize, okay, this doesn't work the way it did at the Prospects Challenge when I'm playing against, you know, 19 and 20-year-olds. But the not doing the drive-bys and the finishing the checks and that part will probably be a habit that needs to be really forced into him at the NHL level, because I think there might be more of a tendency to do a drive-by when, you know, the physicality ramps up at that level.
Not everything developmentally that needs to happen with him is going to happen overnight. I think everyone should be really happy with the strides that he did take this summer at the early looks of it, the 3 games of the Prospects Challenge, and maybe what you saw in practice if he, you know, looked up for it. But I do think that'll happen, and he's got a coach that will definitely get that out of him. I think Lindy will be ready to make sure that he, you know, look, you don't got to blow the guy up, but get on him, cancel him out.
Lindy's not going to be as effusive with praise, would be my guess, as Don Granato was. But he had a pretty glowing report for Kulik today.
Yeah.
You know,
He's being realistic about it.
He thought, you know, that he was really, you know, he was praising his work ethic and his competitiveness throughout that tournament. And so that along with him being in the first group, made you think like, okay, they're going to give him a real shot here. And maybe that's where some of that scoring comes from losing Jeff Skinner, which was quite clearly, I think, at this point, less of a salary cap decision and more of a Carolina Hurricanes-esque, like he does not fit the style that they want to play anymore. And so he was shown the door. So that remains to be seen how they backfill that scoring, but you know, Kulik is certainly one option.
I think that's it, man. Hour and a half in. Want to thank everyone for popping in here tonight. Oh, by the way, this will be blasted out. The next one will be blasted out to Twitter, X, at least on my feed. Doing it, taking the plunge. So we will be able to have a live one go there again. In the meantime, thanks everyone for coming over here to YouTube proper, or if you're watching on Facebook or wherever. This thing still goes to Twitch, whatever the hell that is. I always say that. Nah, I mean, I think there's like one person that does watch this show on Twitch, because every now and then I'll see a comment in here. But at any rate, Matthew, you've done your plugs. I've done mine. It's a good time to get out of here. For Matthew Fairburn from The Athletic, for the production crew, out my truck, ready for hockey season, I'm Kris Baker. Thanks again, everyone, for hopping in. We'll be back again very soon here on the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show. Have a good night.